What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Jeremiah and I here, host of Therapy House, the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Wanted to give you guys this boss intro, kicking off our first episode available by video for all those tuning in traditionally through your regular podcast hosts. We're live. You can see my face, my full beard, and all the fun. Maybe you can even see Brody. Today we have a treat for Men's Mental Health Month. My guests and I decided to discuss the topic of masculinity and how men are defining manhood, or what is considered to be a man. Dr. Chandler Hoffman and I discuss how we formed our own opinions, our own definitions of masculinity, the threat to it posed by the manosphere, and changes that men can make for a better, healthier well-being. So, without further ado, let's start the show. Yes, Brody. Yes. We're starting the show. Woo! New format, new places. Here we are with new faces. I don't know where you'll be, but this is Therapy House, the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. This is your host, Jeremiah Knight, host with the most. And I'm joined today, of course, by Dr. Chandler Hoffman, psychologist, world-renowned enthusiast of relationships.
That's true. Not world, but I am an enthusiast, so I'll say that.
World-renowned, sir. I'm sure you have a couple of downloads in Indonesia and
Possible. That is possible. I'm
Singapore,
sure. Yes.
Australia. I'm sure you got a little ping.
Yeah,
if anything,
there's some international things going on there for sure.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
He joins us today from the Hometown Friends podcast. Well-rounded, other handsome, well-bearded gentlemen that I've met at one of the conferences. We sparked up a conversation over shoes, and somehow we landed on the topic of we both have podcasts, so we should take turns and
Come
joining
on each other's podcasts. Yeah.
Exactly. A friendship has bloomed. Yes. Two men meeting in the wild, becoming friends, talking on the phone. All of these things conflict with some people's ideas of men and relationships. And that is exactly what we're here today to talk about.
Yeah.
And so then love for you to tell people about yourself.
Well, I am Dr. Chandler Hoffman. I only reserve that for when I go to court. So the judges made that. But otherwise, I'm just Chan. I grew up in Berkeley, California. I was actually born in Atlanta, Georgia. Came across the United States at 5 years old. Sat down in Miss Davis's class next to one of my hometown friends. And the world just opened up for me there. Berkeley, California was a place that I felt a huge sense of belonging. I had a diverse group of friendships. My parents were divorced. My dad stayed in Atlanta for a little while. My mom came to Berkeley, and we started our life here. I couldn't even read in first grade. My hometown friend taught me how to read. He used his family to help me. My mom was super educated, but actually pretty, I think, neglectful in a lot of ways. She had 7 kids, and I was her last one, and she was kind of done by the time I came around. It was the 70s, and she let me roam free, so I was kind of a feral kid. And I also had a bunch of learning disabilities that I don't think I knew about that. My mom just sort of had a lot of faith that the world would help me. And I suffered from that a little bit. She was also an alcoholic, so she was neglectful in a lot of ways. An amazing civil rights advocate, someone who had done a lot. She had come to Berkeley to go to Cal to study her passions. But I think she just let the community raise me. And they did. They took me into their houses, shared their families with me, and I got a chance to really learn about myself through all these other people, but of course through my family as well. And that's why I have a Hometown Friends podcast, because these hometown friends were the people that when I look back on my life, I have a lot of gratitude for. So I have this project that you and I share in terms of you were on my podcast and now I get to be on yours. I always wanted to be a psychologist. When I was probably in 8th grade, I didn't know what I could do otherwise. I was not very smart. I
Mhm.
was a pretty good, not a great student, not just always a bad student. I was always like every teacher in my life would be like, Chandler, you're kind of passing by the skin of your teeth. And I would like have that image of like hanging by the skin of my teeth.
Just
And my mom never really cared. I mean, she just had a lot of faith that I would be okay. And that was good in a lot of ways, but it also didn't give me as a lot of support. So I started to realize I needed to find support outside of my family, connecting with these hometown friends and their families. So I learned a lot about becoming a man through the other people in my community. I did have a father, and my father was very present in my life, but I was raised by my mother. So I didn't have as much experience living with my father until a little later in life. That story is I spent ninth grade with my father, and it was probably one of the better years of being parented because I realized, oh, this dude is actually a really good parent. He's a better parent than my mom. But it was ninth grade, and I had gone back to DC and stayed with him.
we're trying to talk about just masculinity, the set attributes, behaviors, and roles culturally and historically associated with boys and men. Yes, it's a broad term, but quite often when I have engaged people in conversation about this piece, it's a lot about how they define it. And I'm really curious about for you being a man. What do you imagine, or at least what is your definition of being a man?
Being a man has all these layers to it of like, well, where do I fit in? And, I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm not actually sure how I define being a man.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is a tough question for a lot of people. This is one of my bag of tricks. I love asking tough questions and very broad and very abstract and being able to kind of think about those things. If I can even just have my clients or even have the people I'm talking to here on this podcast just sit in that peace and angst of it, it's interesting what comes up. And so even just pondering this question the same as I gave to you, I don't think of a list, but I think of people. I think of
Interesting.
moments with my dad and just remember him growing up in our instances where working in the yard. And so, like, you have to be tough. You have to be able to get your hands dirty
Hmm.
and be okay with that.
Right.
I remember just being composed, not only just physically firm and built, but grounded and stern, decisive, concise, even
Mm-hmm.
to some points, knowing where we're going. So there's no ambivalence, determined and persistent. I think also with my dad, there was a lot of pieces of worship, dedication, devotion. So he was very heavy in the church. And so I saw that piece and I saw other men that were kind of still same steadfast. No, this is the right place and this is the right thing. Also very accommodating, very helpful. Hey, you need help
Mm.
with your groceries to the car. I'm helping you with that piece. Brother Sean, he needs his computer fixed. I'm on his computers. We're going to go over to his house after church and we're going to look at it a little bit and give him some tips. But just always being open and willing and helpful. But at least there's some things that he couldn't teach me.
Mm.
He was a man that worked and never really saw him without a job. Only now when I talk to him, he does state that like, "Oh no, I wasn't working for this period of time," which I'm like, I didn't even know, didn't even think. In my mind, it was always written, my dad always works. And so a man always works.
Yeah.
I think there's other people that had not necessarily I guess, what would be considered as feminine qualities, compassionate, good with kids, very attentive to kids, good listener, ones that most people would not assign that to men. But there was Brother Maurice he was great with kids. He would kind of get down to eye level and you kind of seeing that was like, oh yes, that is also in my definition of what
Right.
I imagine. Daniel, who I talked about in your podcast, my friend since we were 4 years old, who lives 4 houses down. Not him, but his dad. And his dad was a football coach and just another individual who I thought of when writing this piece of very stern, very, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, upholding his promises, being able to include people,
Yeah.
being able to like encourage and pour. He was definitely one of the men that poured into me of just like, hey, I know you can do it. I know it's tough. You've been over here at the house and welcoming
Dope.
and knowing that as a man, you can wish well for somebody else. and that's okay. And so, like, that broadens it even
Yeah.
more and more. And so I thought about a lot of these people when it came to that definition.
Yeah, that's great. I think I appreciate that, and I appreciate specifically the idea of a man works, and that is something that I generally think about when we're talking about this and how I personally became aware of what a man does. My father did work where my mother didn't necessarily, but my father always had a job that and he had a small business when he went back and took over his father's business. He was in LA for a long time, but
Mhm.
then and he always had jobs, but then he would have me work in his shop in the summer. And so I learned how to work, and he would sit me down and like teach me about work. He would tell me about there's 2 kinds of work, either a salary or you get piecemeal, right? Number of things you do, you get paid per things you do, or you get a flat fee and you just have everything. I remember him saying very specifically at a lunch one time, "Which one do you want?" And I was like, "I'll take the
Right.
flat fee for some reason, you know?" But he's like, "Well, you can make a lot more money if you are motivated to do this piecemeal thing." And I remember that thinking, "Huh." And I think I remember that taking the job at the courts, like, "Oh, I want a flat
Yeah.
fee job. I wanna be salaried." But
Right.
then now I'm in private practice and it's, eat what you kill, so to speak.
Yep.
So both are interesting ways to work, but work is a big part of being a man, I think, or at least the image that I got
Uh,
of being a man is you have to do something, you have to produce something. And if you don't,
yeah.
you're not a
Create.
man
Yeah.
somehow. And I have a
Mhm.
friend who's really struggling to have a job. And I think that's been really challenging. He's always worked, he's always proved himself to be a man, a provider. And now he's is really, really struggling for identity because he's not working and everybody's judging him for it. Like, man, he needs to get a job. Like everybody's talking shit about him.
Yeah.
But truthfully, I was talking to my wife the other day and she was like, "Well, if he was a woman, no one would even be questioning it." I mean, work is I think a definition, producing something, being financially viable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we'll carry on that piece. I do have a thought on that that we'll revisit in a second. But at least along the way of working on this piece too, I think I also realized that there is also society can also condition me to think about these other things a man are. So did the outside world contribute to your own definition in any way or influence it?
So so much. I mean, we're inundated by images, right? Like I was a fat kid, so being a fat kid did not fit into being, what the ideal image of a man was. So an ideal image of a man is, someone who is built, who is strong, who is muscular. I had none of that. So that really challenged my identity. And then, of course, in ninth grade, when I went to live with my father, I lost 50 pounds. I actually was doing sit ups and push ups. And, I'm not sure I went to the gym necessarily, but I was dieting and losing a lot of weight and became more sinewy and my body looked more like what I wanted my body to look like a man.
Right.
I had more muscles. And that really changed my idea of becoming a man. I went from fat boy to an adolescent man or,
Yeah.
male.
And for that, did it feel like, oh, because I am more muscular, I'm more, even more of a man, or
Had so
is
much
it
more
just solely,
confidence.
I just am?
Yes,
I
so
just,
much more confidence in myself because I was able to change my body. And the body of a
but
man is a big deal.
did it make you become more of a man, or now I'm a man because I have the muscles?
Good question. I don't know if I became more of a man, but I definitely felt like I was more accepted in the society for being a man. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. And I wasn't a man by then, I was an adolescent. But since that time, since that very moment in that time, I have been thoughtful about my body and how that represents myself in the world of being a man. And so working out, having an active lifestyle, also doing things with other men has been a huge aspect of my friendships with other men, right? Is sports or activities is a huge part of how men make friends. They do shit together.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. I ask that way just because I think there's some moments, especially when we talk about society's influence and what do you take from it when you're applying and define this masculinity pieces. There's some people that are like, yes, I was always this thing and now I just became more of it. And some
mhm,
people say, oh, I'm not a man until I
mhm.
do this.
Yeah.
And so whether it's like,
I probably
it's
felt the
sex,
latter. I
boom.
probably felt like I
Yeah.
was not enough unless I had the kind of body that was man-like, that had muscles and or looked the way I wanted it to look, because I was ashamed of the way I looked when I was young. And I don't think I felt I certainly, I guess I felt like a boy. I never did not think I was a boy. I never even thought of it, obviously, but looking back on it, I think I did feel more like a man, if you will, by changing my body, by having agency over it. And that's
Right.
been a huge value
Control.
system throughout my life,
Yeah.
having agency. That's a big part of being
Yeah.
a man, I think, having agency.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's any other instances where society influenced my own definition or added to it or took away from it?
Yeah, I think in relationship to women is certainly a thing that we can talk about in terms of how society influences being a man, dating, marrying, and then sort of what the expectations are through these relationships. Also, just comparison to other guy friends. That
Mm-hmm.
is a huge part of what messages they are sending, comparing ourselves to our friends. That's a huge influence and has always been a big influence on me. And do they attract women? That was a huge part of my adolescence. Like my friends, they attract women. I was always not the one who attracted women somehow, but I hung out with a lot of people who could really attract women. I was always in awe of that. So I probably wanted to be like them, whatever that
Yeah.
was. Good
Yeah.
looking,
And I think
assertive, quick,
mhm,
witty, funny, all kinds of
way
things.
with words. When I think about just the societal piece, it's just like how the world enacted on this Play-Doh ball regarding my definition, instead of it being solely subjective of our making, it is what the world tells and puts in. I think there are some parts with the opposite sex and you want a girlfriend, you want to be close to other people, and we're going to decide what is masculine or or not. Solely leaning into that piece and letting that lead, definitely in different parts of my life and areas of it were led by that piece. And they got to dictate whether this is manly or this is not manly. I want to be manly, so I have to do this piece. Some pieces where it's like, oh yeah, the man pays. So you
Right,
got to be able to provide, or
right,
else you're not a man.
right.
You gotta have broad shoulders, you gotta work out, you gotta be firm,
Uh-huh.
you don't share your emotions, you don't
Uh-huh.
cry. Absolutely not. And I think it gradually becomes a long list of men don't.
Yeah.
Men don't do this, men don't do that. So you quite often say you don't learn from the society of what men do, you learn what men don't do,
Yeah. You know
you
that
know?
quote from a league of their own, the women's baseball league, when the manager looks at the girl who's crying and he's like, "There's no crying in baseball." And of course, I use that with my friends a lot, right? There's no crying in this. What, like we don't cry. There's no crying in baseball. Baseball's a man's sport, right? You don't cry. It's a funny line because it's emblematic of what the
Mhm.
messages we have got.
Just thinking about, like, just being a boy navigating the world and going to these different spaces, and in our podcast, we talked about men talk shit, and you're supposed to just take it, and it's like,
Right. That's how
"Okay,
you
are you
get
sure? Because
along.
he said the most foulest thing to me, and I was supposed to let that go." Yeah. No, men don't get hurt by what people say,
Of course,
or a man can take a punch,
I
or
mean, maybe
yeah.
we're jumping
It's
ahead
okay
here,
to hit.
but the work that we do together with divorcing folks who have been in conflict with their spouses and are wanting to be parents or have custody of their children, much of the conflict has come from these relationships that have been highly conflictual
Yeah.
and often come from these overemphasis on having these what it is to be a man, right? Not crying, not being vulnerable, being aggressive, using force, using
Pushing.
aggression and violence. That's a big part of being a man is being able to be familiar with some kind of violence, whether it's being in sports and hitting people, right? You were a football player and I
Mhm.
was a lacrosse player. I
Yeah.
loved hitting people. I loved it. Loved it. And I
Yeah, the
loved being
firm
playing
push.
basketball and being the most, you know, just like focused on trying the hardest. That's also about being a
Competition.
competition and extra effort and going further and pushing your body. That seems to be what my definition of a man is. This is what I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to work
Yeah.
harder than you.
Yeah, especially if we get into physical ability and coaching and sports. You have to do these things, and you have to welcome competition. You have to welcome this piece of testing yourself and pushing your limits. All of these things can be well and great. And I think for many men, that leads to them to places of success and power
Yeah.
and achievement.
Yep.
I think the issue with some of these definitions are that it can be a double-edged sword or quickly turn into a birdcage. You presented a great example of your friend who doesn't have a job right now, and you're hit with this piece of, well, a man works, he provides, he's productive. He doesn't sit at home all day and watch TV. He doesn't sit at home and take care of the kids. And so then in us, we have this battle, this push, this pressure that begins to start building. Are we worthy? Are we a good husband? Because I've written the script that a good husband provides and works, but what about the times when I don't or I can't? Not by my own willpower or choice, it's just because circumstances.
Yeah.
And then we get into this place where because we've written this list of masculinity that's so rigid that if we don't, or if there's an instance that conflicts, then what? So listen, this is where I begin to worry men in domestic violence or tough relationships. This is where I begin to worry about men in midlife crises or conflicts or existential crises. This piece where a man's supposed to be composed, a man's supposed to keep his emotions, a man's supposed to be concise and discern. And if I'm not, because I'm going through something, because my parents died, because I didn't get this promotion, because I don't know who I am at this certain point in my life, because I had thought things a totally different way. And I'm realizing there's little cracks in the armor, or my partner may not see me in the light that I wish that they see me, or I'm getting feedback or contrary ideas that I'm not the man I want to be. Then what happens? They crumble, they feel these worries, they feel insignificant, and then they do things to boost their ego
Yeah.
instead of coming to a place of, wow, this is something I'm feeling. Let me invite people in to help me with this and hold up. But no, it's just, I need to have my worth back. So I need to do extreme. I need to be a certain way. And I think when we talk about like custody as well, I think there's some pieces where I've heard what people write about dads. They're not involved. They don't care. I want to be the opposite of that. And so they fight to, again, back to the ego, they fight to get to this piece where I have to be involved. I have to force myself in there. I know the court is going to be against me. I know everybody's going to be against me, not want this, but I do. I'm going to show them.
Right. And they also talk about rights of
Mm,
being a father or
mhm.
rights of wanting to be involved. Also, a right to have 50%. We hear it every
Mhm.
day. I
Right.
have a right to have 50% custody. Well, actually, you don't have a right, truthfully, but our standard is what's in the best interest of children. And that's not a right. But we do want fathers involved, right? We
We
do.
do.
And from my perspective, I'm a father. And I thought about it a lot because I was a custody expert throughout my children's young lives. And I thought about it
Mhm.
many times about what it would be like for me to have to go through my own divorce because I was dealing with people's
Right.
divorce every day. And I have
Yeah.
this story that I often tell. I was working all the time. I was trying to get to the court so I could clock in, and I had to take my kid to middle school, and he was late every single day. Every day the kid was late, and it was frustrating and very difficult. And I worried that how is he going to get to a job when he gets older? I'm going to raise this boy to be on time so that he can go to a job and not get fired. Then I was worried about my own sense of getting fired, trying to get to work on time. It was a big mess. Every day we would fight, basically, of me getting him outside the door. And I'd get him to school and get on my phone, distracted by my clients. And one day my son said, "Dad, why do you get so angry at me when we're already late? Why do you keep lecturing me about being late when we're already late? Like there's nothing we can do about it." And I was like, huh. And I had been studying some sort of meditation at that point and being mindful and, mindful parenting. And I started to realize, wow, I'm missing out on this time with my kid. All these people come into my office and they want 50% custody. And I
Mhm.
realized that I needed to be more mindful of this time. So I told my job, I'm going to be late and I'll work late on this other side, but I'm going to be late on this side because I try to get my kid to school. And I just would walk with him holding his hand, or sometimes he'd run ahead if I was lecturing him. But then as I didn't lecture him anymore, he would start to walk right next to me and we would have these great conversations. And when I left him, he would say, "I love you, Dad." And my heart just filled. And I said, "I love you too." I remember feeling like if a man could stop fighting for 50% of custody and they could just expect and exist in 15 minutes of custody, then they
Mhm.
could actually have everything they needed. And I started to call
Exactly.
it my 15 minutes of custody because I'd come home at 7 o'clock and he would already be basically damn near in bed. My wife was doing most of the work there.
Mhm.
And still to this day, my son will say, "Dad, we need our 15 minutes of custody." So we like take the dog for a
Mhm.
walk or we walk around town. But it's emblematic of the idea the relationship between me and my son was created in a very short period of time. And I use that in my work a lot to encourage people that it's quality over quantity.
Right, right. When I talk with the dads, it's not a piece of like genuine disdain because it's their well, one dad did try to argue it was in the Constitution that he should have rights to the child, and it's like, where in the Constitution does it say? And he's like, I'm not gonna tell you. It's between me and the judge. Yeah, it's definitely not the Constitution. But when I ever talk to these dads, it's more so not from a place of want to one up mom or this piece of the mistrust that mom won't. It just comes from a genuine worry of, will I be able to give them my values? Will I be able to instruct them and teach them how to fish? Will I be able to have this opportunity to leave a positive impression on their lives, however they may deem that
Great, great point.
worthy?
Yeah.
Or their vision, because when they come to us, they all have their own visions of what they would be like as a dad. The moments where they're fishing and riding bikes, or
Yes.
where he's cheering from the crowd as they go and make a good tackle. I think there's a lot of these stories and hopes that I think some men do not get to share or have never expressed to other people. And to be in that space with them and be able to talk about, hey, this I don't get as much time and I'm worried, which they don't say, 'cause I don't think they'll ever be vulnerable enough to say, Jeremiah, I'm worried I won't get that chance. I won't get that game of catch in the backyard as the sun's going down after work. I'm worried that I won't get the shout out at the graduation speech and thank you, dad. If you weren't there, I'm worried about not getting those
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah. It's a great point. I think you're so
And
right that fathers want to be able to teach. We want to help these kids become adults and often miss the opportunity to just witness them or listen to them. I think parents in general, moms or dads, often believe that their job is to teach the kids everything. And sometimes it is, but often I have learned by being a parent, that's not actually all the job. And in fact, sometimes you do yourself harm as a parent by only being the one who is micromanaging them and teaching them everything. Life is going to teach them so much more. We just need to witness their growth.
yeah, it's a misconnotation. I think there are some people that will say dads don't want to be involved. No, they genuinely do. They genuinely want to leave an impact. They
Yes.
genuinely want to get their hands dirty. They want to share opportunities. And I think that that's what fuels the fire to push for this thing. But at least then it's still the piece of trying to get them to understand it's not about the quantity of time, it's about the quality, because there's also plenty of dads like, "Yeah, I have a full weekend with them, and we sat on the couch and did nothing."
Yeah. A lot of complaints by
This is
moms
the issue.
around the
Yeah,
issue. They say they don't do
yeah,
anything with their dad. They watch a lot of
yeah,
TV. I mean, being a father has taught me a lot about what it is to be a man. It's a really interesting conversation about how we
which
learn
yeah,
from other fathers. I interviewed a friend's father on my podcast, and I remember telling him that even though he was not my father, I remember watching him as my friend's father. My friend's mom died, so he had a single dad, and his father was like this very well renowned dude with a beard,
yeah,
big, tall, strong, and he was stern. And I remember my dad's not like that. I remember taking from that guy. That's, not saying it then, but in reflection, knowing, oh, that was one of the images I had of being a man: big, strong, stern, take no shit, but also shit talking a little bit, like funny, but stern, like really stern with his own son. And because I was over there, I learned a lot about being what it was to be a man from him, but a lot of other fathers.
yeah. So, I wanna come back to this point because I feel like it's a big piece of what my theory is on how to kinda move to a more healthier place with masculinity. But at least
Yeah.
the idea of this birdcage and somehow some of these scripts that we write and rules from our perception collapse on us. I think it's right now in our society, it does collapse on a lot of men because it leaves them rigid. I can only have this, or I can only feel good, I can only feel my manliness. They can really embrace their masculine energy by these arbitrary achievements. And so I think as the loneliness gap increases, as the education gap between men and women increases, there's a lot of men that are feeling emasculated because they're not hitting these benchmarks or these arbitrary pieces.
Yeah.
I think they're feeling like, yeah, women are getting ahead and men are, or
They're
at least
being
then feeling like they're stuck in the sand.
they're being privileged. And especially when the society is talking about men's privilege specifically,
Hmm.
we feel often like we're not being seen for the challenges that we have, right? Which is that women are outpacing men in the workforce in different ways in certain areas. I mean, especially in our profession, you and I definitely got hired at Family Court Services because I was a man. I was competing against two women that were much more seasoned than I, and they were kind of surprised that they didn't get it, but I definitely got that job because I was a man. So I did have a privilege there, but it was because the profession that we chose to be in, or that I chose to be in, was dominated by women at that point.
Yeah, I was a male hire as well. At least then there wasn't too many people in our field, like you said. Then again, there wasn't too many people that applied and I had to
Right.
run up against. There are some areas where women do take the precedence. I mean, child custody. Yeah, there's majority of instances where, yeah, women are going to have the kids. There are certain resources that mainly focus on just women and getting these resources rather than men, or at least prioritizing women and children. So there's some pieces where we begin talking about this manosphere
Right.
or men that feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. Yes, I can understand how they get there. I can understand how they can feel emasculated and they want to feel righted by the world. They want to feel like they have a fair shot in it. It's just about the way they go about it to feel balanced, to create these groups that kind of promote this piece so that they could feel better about themselves. That's where I kind of feel uneasy about where this takes us
Mhm.
in the world.
Yeah. I read a couple books that recently have discussed this area. Richard Reeves of Men and Boys. He's like a journalist, but he talks a lot about how the education system is not necessarily designed for boys, right? It
Mhm.
says sit down in one place and to take notes, and don't get up and don't talk out and don't be funny and stop talking, sit and focus. And of course, we're seeing this sort of ADHD version of children that don't succeed in school because they're distracted and they need more physical expression. And of course, you get like a half an hour of recess and a half an hour of lunch or something like that. So
Yeah,
You
45 or
often,
something like that.
you don't get a lot of time to express all this male energy, if you will, this aggression or play,
Mhm,
or the school systems are failing children in certain areas and specifically boys. And I think Richard Reeves actually makes the argument that boys should start later, so they shouldn't start at 5. They should really start at 6. They mature in lots of ways slower than women. And they also need more curriculum that is more male focused, more action oriented, sort of returning to this area of hands on curriculum. And he's got a bunch of recommendations specifically for educational systems. This other book that I read was this Scott Galloway book called Notes on Being a Man. And he really talks
mhm,
about how important male friendships are and how important
mm,
he sort of makes all these recommendations about what a man is and what his idea of what a man is. And his idea of a man is someone that does provide for other people, that does actually creates more purpose for themselves. What can you do for other people? And he really encourages men
right,
to take that on. Like, don't just think about yourself, think about other people. How are you helping other people? How are you helping your neighbors? How are you helping your friends? How are you helping your wife? How are you helping your girls? How are you
mhm,
protecting other people so that you can create more purpose in your life? And that I think
mhm,
is really important. And I do agree with him there. And then he also talks about friendships and how he changed in his friendships to become more vulnerable, like we were talking about, to become more
mhm,
thoughtful, to become more, because he's seeing that men are lonelier than women in lots of ways because women naturally gather and have intimacy in relationships. And men, I think overall, we've not been taught to have intimacy in relationships, which would encourage
right,
more vulnerability in relationships, telling people really what's going on in your life, not just, oh, yeah, it's all good, but
yeah,
actually, my dad's dying or my mom's dying or oh my girl is criticizing me and I'm fighting with her or whatever it is that you're vulnerable about, that actually you have some shit that's going wrong in your life, to be able to share that with your friends, not just women.
yeah. So I get that those ideas exist and that vulnerability that is needed. And there's also this realm of, I feel like this isn't fair. We're always getting the short end of the stick. Our voice doesn't matter. We can't be heard and be seen. For you, how do you see boys or men navigating that world where it's unfair, or we should be picking up girls, we should be making money? Because I think the biggest issue with the manosphere is it's heavily weighted on this piece of what society has already proposed, but then men start to have this idea that they are not worthy or of value at birth. They have to earn it. They have to become this thing. And how can we invest in these relationships and be vulnerable when we're not worthy? We have to earn to get all these other things. How do you make sense of how boys and men navigate these pieces with all these different distractions, all these different billboards and flashing lights of, oh, this is to be a man, this is to be a man here, this is to be a man here, and this little corner is, well, if you're vulnerable,
Hmm. Yeah, I still don't think we do a good job overall in our society of helping men know the continuum of what it is to be a man, right? The range of behaviors that actually help us become well. Like well-being, there's a well-worn path for well-being, right? It is to
mhm,
have more relationships or to have important relationships. And I think boys, very specifically in some of my research, naturally have very vulnerable friendships early on. But it's Naomi Wade has some studies about how boys have very, very vulnerable relationships early on in their youth. And then it actually they start to get the message in high school that that is not valued and that that's not good for them. And then it moves into adulthood where men stop having vulnerability with other men. And one of the ways in which you and I have started to create our friendship or practice our friendship, even though we're steeped in the same thing, is to have our friendship be, I don't know if it's called a male, sort of a modern male kinds of relationships. And I think I have a men's group where we challenge ourselves to become vulnerable with each other, to actually tell these guys what's going on. And I've had other fathers groups where people are yearning for this. They're yearning
Yes.
to be their whole selves and to actually have male friendships that they can trust to be vulnerable. So it's something that I think men are yearning for, but we don't have a lot of spaces that just naturally come up in our society that allow for it or encourage it.
True. And I think there's some of that where it gets to be dependent on the community. I believe that that billboard of vulnerability and connection and community isn't as broad and big is because there's not a lot of people who are open to that piece. You have to be open and willing to engage in that part. And quite often you need other people. And so it's like a game of pickup. You show up at the park and you don't have 9 other people, then the game's not being played. We're not playing a full game. Like, yeah, you can play one on one, but it's not the same. You don't really want to play one on one. You want to play the full court. You want to use the whole piece. And so some people just walk away. So some of these pieces where it's like, I want to be vulnerable. There's no one else. I can't be vulnerable with myself. I'm gonna pack it in. Or let alone I'm gonna come to women. There's some men they're like, I want to be vulnerable with women. I don't know how. I want to learn. I only learn through practice. But women are just like, oh, you can't tell us this. Like, you're not a manly man if you do this.
Right. So
So
women contribute to this boxed in, as you said, bird cage, you're saying.
yeah, and Bell Hooks, the Will to Change is one book that she centers around masculinity. She also talks about it in All About Love as well as this piece that women also benefit the patriarchy. Early on in the book, it describes this idea that if men do take up space and are emotional, that's put on women to hold space for it. And there are some women that do not, that aren't able or are overwhelmed by creating and holding the space because with their femininity, that could be tied to, am I a good partner? I'm not a good partner if my partner is feeling all these feelings, and that could lead into question. It begs me to wonder about and would love to have more conversations about whether women genuinely want a man that has the feelings and expresses them freely, or whether they want one or the other of either you bottle it up and you don't bring me the feelings, and you're a manly man who doesn't I don't have to worry about it, or you're somebody who is self-sufficient and you have feelings, you know what you feel, you know what you want, but the guilt, the shame, the grief, the hurt, you're able to handle that piece yourself, and I just get to show up and just be.
I, I hear it a lot in the relationship work that I do, the divorce work that I do. I do hear a lot from women. I was never able to really get them to be vulnerable with me or to feel like we were having the kind of conversation that would feel like real intimacy. There was always an avoidance of it. We drifted apart because I didn't feel connected to him. And then, of course, his complaint
Mhm.
is she was always complaining about me, she was always criticizing me. And so I shut down even more. So there's very well worn patterns of people's
Mhm.
behaviors, especially in relationships where someone feels like they're not seeing the other person. And it often is more gendered, where women are yearning for more vulnerability from men. But to your point, sometimes they're steeped in the same soup, which is, can they handle it? Do they really want that? And I think that's confusing for men sometimes because being a man is not vulnerable, but then you're supposed to be vulnerable with your woman. And sometimes that's the only place that you can be vulnerable. But actually, they don't even know how to be vulnerable. Like, why is that even
Right.
important for us to do? We're supposed to be able to handle everything. So, like, why should we be vulnerable with people? But that's the acceptance of the self. Being vulnerable is being acceptance that we don't have it all figured out.
Right, right, and I think for me, I can speak to myself and then going to therapy and then working with more men in just betterment because there's a lot of men that do come and they do want to work on becoming better dads or better husbands, just better themselves. Is for me just being able to go through life and yeah, I had these positive role models and things, but I ran through groups and girls who definitely encouraged or rewarded this particular man or this particular facade. You're tough, you're discerning, you concise, you never have an issue, you never speak up, you never cause any problems. And then gradually you kind of adapt to these pieces because they are being rewarded. And then in high school, then you are conflicted with even more of these pieces. A man's body, his shape, his performance, he's productive, he does things, he's not lazy, he's all these things. And so again, just you're molded into this thing because then you begin to worry about, well, will I have love? Will I be loved? Will I be admired? Because I think that is one attribute that everybody has. But I think men specifically, they want to feel wanted. They want to feel admired. They want to
Yeah.
feel looked up to and revered. Legacy for men.
Yeah.
I think we can agree. Legacy for men is like, yes,
Yeah.
give me the last name. Give me the statue. Give me the plaque that's forever going to be on the side of the big building.
Yeah.
There's this piece of like, will I be?
Yeah.
And then I think for me as I got older and hey, it's cool to the guys if I hang out with more girls. And so I started hanging out with more girls and then just more guys just talked a lot of shit,
Mhm.
a lot of competition. I just didn't want to deal with that too much. So I had my smaller group of friends. But over time, this masculinity, this definition, all the scripts and everything I wrote kind of stacked up and stacked up and stacked up. It just got to a place where it's like, I am me, but there are parts of me that I have to cut off to be this man or this person that's loved.
Yeah.
And eventually I got into relationships. There's ones that didn't work. There's parts where I kind of started to notice that I just fit the relationship. The relationship wasn't built for me, or we didn't build the relationship around me, but we built it up of the me that could make this work, could keep this person. Because there came this worry of if I color outside the lines, if I take up too much space, if I begin to have feelings,
Mm.
will you be okay with that, or are you just gonna leave?
R
So anxious attachment became
Interesting.
something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I imagine there's some piece of like avoidance. Avoidant attachment is there too. If you're lucky, you get both. But there's still this piece of like, I've been instructed to not have these feelings, not speak up all this time. And then all of a sudden you get into the relationship and they're like, yeah, do it.
Right.
And it's a jolt. It's a jolt of like, wait, are you? No, this is a trap. This is
Uh-huh.
Chris
Uh-huh.
Hansen, are you coming out? Or like, it's just like, we got you. Or Ashton Kutcher, like,
Uh-huh.
you've been punked. Yep.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
you shared your feelings. You said you didn't
Uh-huh.
like this about
Uh-huh.
me, or you didn't
Uh-huh.
like how I said this at dinner.
Uh-huh.
I'm going.
Well, I mean, to your point, what are the images that we're getting from movies and TV shows in general? The images that we get that talk about being men. I mean, again, it's very it's very contained to certain images, right? And what we are seeing a lot of in our work is that people don't have a lot of awareness of where this all comes from. So I think this is a great conversation because it's bringing me more awareness of like even my own sense of self. And I think men specifically don't get a lot of opportunity to reflect on where we have come from, what images have influenced us. I think women may get more of that in some way. I'm not really
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. It's a different perspective, different twist. I think it's different, but I think the path and the challenges still remain. This piece of can you be loved if you're not perfect, if you're not performing, if you're not fitting in this box.
Yeah.
And I think everybody has to eventually cross that bridge and figure it out for themselves. But men are, I think you said it well with even just the books and things of just like, are we prepared enough? Are they prepared enough that they can take up space? And quite often, as I shared with my story, like a lot of the men I've talked to in therapy is it comes to a point where they have to flip on a dime almost because it's you're getting married, you're having kids, and it's like all of a sudden you have to be this totally different person and you question or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's like you're going to college and you have to figure out your major. And there's certain ones that are going to be manly and some that are that may not be considered. And do you pursue it even though you have a passion for it or do you not? Or if you do so, how do you need to do it in a masculine way? And there's this confrontation of who am I? Am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be okay with it? Or who am I in this world? Because there is ambivalence, there is the unknown, there is anxiety within men of meeting these standards, and what do I do with it? How do I achieve confidence? And here's this person who has millions of followers and on a workshop and saying, "Hey, I can get you there. I have the roadmap. You want girls? You want money? I got you."
Yeah.
And actually, you're the underdog.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's another little thing for men, just like being an underdog. I love it.
Yeah, right. That
Yes.
motivates us
Yes.
to that motivates men to achieve, right? Is needing to compete, and having that competition and being a leader. That's another thing that I think we get in message. By the way, I would think there's something around religion, and
Mhm.
the major
The
religions
identity, group
in our
identity.
world often have previously prescribed men to be the leaders of their families. And if you're not the leader, and then of course you get subjugated when truthfully the women in your family are truly the leaders in specifically child custody issues. That's why we see this a lot, right? Where men feel at a disadvantage in custody situations because women were leading in that area and they were leading in a very traditional sense, men often leading in this financial sense, but they were not leading in the custody thing. That they're really desperate to be seen as actually wanting to lead in that area too. And then, of course, I think we see this a lot where women are, dependent on men financially, and men are dependent on women emotionally and also access to children.
That's interesting. Depending on women emotionally, what comes to mind is not in the general sense of I can confide in you. It's more of you make me feel good.
Yeah, both. I
Yeah.
think in a marriage specifically, there is sometimes a confidence that we confide in women. And then loss of that when people are splitting up, when people are divorcing, that's a huge loss. And they often suffer from that loss and they're fearful of losing more. Now, that's why often we hear complaints of men getting new partners really quickly.
Yes, in a healthy way, confiding in. But I think in some of like some of the really bad cases, it's been more so you're supposed to make me feel good. You're supposed to not give me feedback. You're supposed to be quiet, but not heard.
Right.
You're supposed to be my arm candy. Whenever I want to go out and watch a movie, you want to watch the same movie I want to watch. You're supposed to baby me, but also make me feel like a man, kind of thing.
Right, yeah, we hear this a lot. Women are like, "I
Yes.
don't need to mother," like, I have already kids, I'm not trying to mother you, right?
Right.
And that I don't wanna take care of you. I hear that a lot in my
Yeah.
work. I feel like I have 3 kids, 2 kids and a
Hmm.
husband. Truthfully, being more aware, I think, as a person, as a human, is that we do ultimately have a lot of leftover desires and needs to be cared for like our mothers cared for us. Either we yearn for it because we got it, but this is where attachment comes in. Often if we are anxiously or insecurely attaching to our parents, we often are going through life unconsciously looking for people to care for us differently than we got it.
Right. In a particular way, so we can have that corrective experience or in some way, I think, is it imago therapy, where it is the idea that we're looking for a partner that can heal the wounds that our parents left. If you had parents that were unavailable and not emotionally aware, you're looking for a partner that is going to be emotionally aware and cognizant and show up for you.
Right.
Where my parents were very controlling and they didn't allow me to be me, and I'm looking for a partner that's going to let me do whatever I want.
We see the other side of that too, which is that we're very familiar with certain kinds of personalities or find ourselves in controlling relationships. If we have familiarity with certain kinds of people, and we often find ourselves in adult relationships that mirror our parental relationships. Yes?
Yeah. In thinking about how men are on this trajectory, and same as women, to answer this question of will I be loved if I take up space and I'm vulnerable? If you see me and truly know me, will you accept me? Women, I think they maybe have much more freedom to explore their feelings and experiment with different people, more groups, more communities that are more attentive to women and just allowing them to be themselves, share feelings, share what you like and don't like. versus men. No, 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 you have to be quiet. And they have to flip on a dime. I think it puts them in a spot of sitting with that worry of will they, won't they? If I'm outside the line, will they snatch away my masculinity? How will I and if that happens, how will I get my women? How will I get my money? How would all these things that require it, and yet there's this individual guru whatsoever that's like, "Hey, come with me, I'll show you the way." Plus, there's a community out there that's also doing the same things. You don't have to do it with them, but you'll build yourself up by your bootstraps, and you'll have friends and like-minded people that are gonna help you
Yeah.
with that. So please come.
Yeah.
I think that's the route they go for the community piece
Yeah.
rather than the community and being vulnerable
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah. 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 I think it's much easier to be a part of a group when you've been steeped in a certain way of masculinity and you don't have to question that anymore, right? You're not steeped in what it feels to be vulnerable and actually get the good parts of being vulnerable, right? To be accepting of the sense that I've got shit that goes wrong, or I want to be able to have kind of friendships that allow me to have, to your point of like these manosphere sort of groups, we're all yearning to be a part of a group, right? This is why team sports are so critical, and military is so critical to men's well-being in general. When we're in teams, most men feel like it's the best time of their lives when they are in
Yeah.
teams, team
Yep. And in
sports,
unison,
and yeah,
connection.
they're pulling for the same thing. There's purpose, there's meaning, and when they separate from these things, like I've worked with professional athletes who retire, in their 30s or their 20s, and there's a lot of depression and anxiety that comes from it, and a lot of bad, relationships that come from it because of the loss of that sense of belonging. And it's with teams, and military people often really have huge disadvantages when they come out of those situations and then they're back into sort of regular society. They panic because they don't have a sense of connection and belonging. They don't know the rules of engagement.
Yeah. How do we move masculinity into a place where it is better for our own well being? Because masculinity and how we write it is invasive. It can be insidious and cancerous if it's done incorrectly. It ripples through all these different definitions of how we define different things. How you as a man show up in a relationship, what you do as a father, how do you show up at work, a man working out, a man acceptance of his body, a man's relationship with complacency and uncertainty. All of that stuff is written based on how you see a man and what a man is. But to get to a healthy place, I feel like you need to be secure within yourself. Be able to take back that the definition of masculinity being solely you. Like you write that. It's
Yeah,
not what other people write for you.
right.
Who cares what anybody else says? What masculinity is what you decide.
It's
And if you
so
feel like,
I know that's so hard these days, Jeremiah, because there's so many inputs, right? I mean, social
mhm,
media is a huge part of this. There's so much content that is telling us, that is distracting us from being by ourselves and being
right,
more aware of our own sense of self. You could never be bored again. There's no
oh yeah,
boredom is beyond. Now there's no more boredom. We don't have to, at least. So I think, to your point, the idea of being willing to truly accept who we are, to create our own sense of self, is very challenging in this society because there's so many social comparisons. And I guess there
yes.
always have been, but there's more now. Social media is a huge part of it. If you go on any of the social media platforms and you compare yourself to some other person, it's very challenging to accept oneself for who they are.
So I have this theory about comparison, and quite often it comes from a place of uncertainty. And I feel like a lot of clients I've talked to, or even just moments in my life where I've been uncertain, that's when I often find myself trying to find somebody who I can see how I measure up to them. But if I was confident in what I'm doing, I wouldn't be looking at anybody else. And so I think that's one thing I for sure within this profession and doing therapy very early on when I wasn't sure whether I'm heading the right direction, am I doing the right thing? It was this piece of let me see what everybody else is doing. Let me try to compare. I'm gonna feel better, more confident if I'm doing better than X, Y, and Z. But now in this time, now where I'm at now, August, August, I'll be doing this for 10 years. I don't care what anybody else is doing. I'm curious to know how they're doing it
Mhm.
and getting ideas, but I know my way is my way. And I know that what works for me. So there is this piece of being certain that if you know you are able to more confident in writing that definition. I think getting there, I wouldn't have been able to get there without being vulnerable, without being able to have a group of other guys, therapists to be able to talk. I'm explaining this thing and you get what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it sticks out to me that you and I are becoming friends because I do think it has been more rare for me to have male therapist friends. Although I will tell you, there's like a rash of new male therapists, people that I've met. I've met many of them these days who are later in life are becoming male therapists because they went and did something first. They had a first career, a writer, a filmmaker, a businessman. They're all launching second careers to become therapists as men. And because they
Hmm.
didn't get truthfully what they were yearning for in their first profession, I think because they were wearing that male mask and they
Yeah.
actually never even thought, and they never even thought this would be something they would want to do. And they're coming to me because I've been in the field 27 years now. So I learned I wanted to be a psychologist in 8th grade. I figured that out. And now they're coming to me and saying, "Well, how did you know that?" Or, "Can you mentor me?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Wow, like you guys had been successful businessmen or
Other
writers
places.
or
Yeah.
filmmakers, and now you're coming back to this profession." So I do think men in general are becoming more aware that there are different ways to be a man, and
Yeah.
they are expanding into these other areas. At least my network is
Right.
becoming more available to this side of life.
Yes. Yes. And it's just interesting how everyone does get to that point and does find their way. But I still think it comes to this piece of they had a space to share that piece. And Brene Brown describes this vulnerability as these moments in which you express your feelings, thoughts about times of transition and conflict and risk and weakness, even
Yes. Yes.
or wanting or yearning. And to be able to share that with somebody, again, hitting this question, just scratching at it, like if I'm truly me, if I take off the mask, will they accept me? Will they love me?
Yeah.
And to be provided with that, finally, for, or as men, it's just finally, yes. Even if I make mistakes, even if I don't perform or produce, just to be embraced in that is changing.
It is.
Because for me, when it happened, I think I had a lot of failed relationships. It just didn't feel it was working. I still kind of carried this piece of like, I don't think I can really be me because everybody has known me as this guy. This guy
Mm.
is who knows what he's doing, stays out of trouble, is composed, doesn't get mad. He's so flexible. And the challenge was to become somebody who was like, no, I speak up, I get mad. But then also the challenge to like, I need to share with people so they actually know that I'm going through stuff.
Yes.
They know that there's a lot of anxiety down here. And it did start with my partner at the time. It unfortunately it was just too late. I wish it had started earlier. Wish I got the healing earlier, but it just that's the way how some relationships works. But then the other piece was more so of my friends, guys that I do the podcast with, guys that I grew up with. If I share with them, then how would they see me when I have advice for them? Will they not call me because oh Jeremiah's going through stuff, and they did an amazing job. I could just start off little by little, but the fact that they were able to hold space and ask me questions. How did that make you feel? And what can I do to help? I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about asking them for help, like,
No.
which is another male trait. You're self-sufficient, you're
Yeah.
independent.
Yeah.
But the fact that like, at a TV, my boy Jeremy, he's on the podcast, moving out, He's gonna take his TV. I was gonna replace it. I found on Craigslist 75-inch manly man. I was like, look, I don't need nobody's help. I got the U-Haul. The guy helps me put it in. I drive it home. It's strapped up. I'm good. It's time to take it out. Take it out, but 75-inch TVs. It doesn't get off the truck so easily, and ended up dropping it and hit a corner,
Of course.
shattered it. $800.
Yep. Because you
It's
didn't
like
ask for help,
12.
essentially.
Didn't ask for help because I was too manly of a man. I wasn't vulnerable enough. And so I had to sit with myself. What am I doing here? Why aren't I doing this? It conflicts with all my being, all that I have written. And I think this is some of what the 15-minute custody is, where I had to experience it. I had to sit within myself and say, how I written this is not working for me. And being confident of, I don't care what anybody else says. I'm going to let go of this. I'm going to try something new that I feel like could work for me. And the fact that I called John and he was like, Jeremiah, I'd be happy to help you. And
We need help from our friends. We need help from other people.
right,
And being a man does not mean that we don't need help. Actually, some would argue, right, that this is the this is what we're doing right here is we're recreating the sense of like what's being a man for us. And to your point, like
exactly.
how can we help others because we do have a profession that I think is supposed to give opportunities for men to be vulnerable with us because we are therapists, we are psychologists, we are people that are actually modeling well being, right? We're encouraging them to be vulnerable with us because we're saying, first of all, this is the space to do it. And I see so much, especially when men go through divorce, that it's an actual real opportunity. Some are really shut down, but many are cracked open. And it's an opportunity to help them transition into a different way of being because a lot of what they were trying to do in their relationships really didn't work. And it got them to a place where it was the hardest time in their life. I had a dude said, I've been through tours in Iraq. I've been in foxholes and battles, and going through a divorce and child custody issue has been the hardest thing and the most challenging thing that I ever done in my life. And for him
Yeah.
to say it that way, like speaking of a manly man, this dude is built and tall and brawn. And he
Mhm.
like was a hero. And he said divorce was the hardest thing he had ever had to do, breaking up
Man,
with his wife.
I'll take it one step further. What do you think it would be like, even just a task of sharing feelings around that piece and your experience through that? Like that part is also daunting in the same, because then there's the risk of somebody saying, "Oh, well, suck it up. Oh, well, it's not as bad. It could be worse." To be that moment where I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to share this with somebody and I hope they catch me, and they don't. Or if anything, they even make it worse by just minimizing it or pushing it down further. And I think if the men can be and they are caught, like these are moments where you're undoing so much for them and the world's changed because one, they're rewriting, they're taking risks in doing so. They have an opportunity for each other. I can't tell you how much it meant to me for John to say, yes, I'll help you with the new TV, or even him to hear the story of, hey, I busted the last one that I got a week ago and I had to pay this much. And him just be like, okay, that's all. Like, that's all I needed. Just like, oh, you're so dumb. And no, just all right. Well, I can see that this means a lot to you. I'll be happy to help. I'll get my brother to help with. And I'd always been a somebody who, like, no one's going to help. If I ask for help, people aren't going to be there. I'm always there for them. If I need something, if I have something to share, no one's there for me, but I'm there for everybody. And this is why I didn't give people off these opportunities, because they would disappoint me. But to be vulnerable in that moment, to be caught, undid a lot and inspired me to keep going on. And I'm hoping that other people have that opportunity. I'm so happy that the men that do reach out and request consultations, they are there. They do show up. I want to be better. And then they come and they actually do the work. They actually say, hey, yes, you gave me homework. Jeremiah came back. I thought about it. I did this and this. I tried it. And yes, it helped. Or I tried it. It was a little tough. Let's talk about it. I really want to get this down. To catch them and be there for them and see them grow. is great, and I hope that they take that piece of, "Yes, your feelings matter. Yes,
Yeah.
be vulnerable. It's safe to be here. Yes, undo what you thought about being a dad and find these pieces." So with the 15 minutes of custody, that piece of you that lived your experience, recognized that, "Hey, this script I wrote didn't work for me. I need to change it because this is not lining up with the father I wanna become, the man I wanna become, the worker, the husband, and I need some to do something different." And I don't know if you talked to somebody about it. I don't know if you had, your own dialogue. I mean, for you, what led you to kinda let go of what you had originally written for your script to move to this new spot of, "I need to think it differently"? Was it just the meditation readings, or was it something else?
I mean, it was those 2 influences, I think, is really just being more conscious and aware, really understanding what was the most important thing in my life. The most important thing in my life that I've always wanted is relationships with the people that I love, and my son, I had all these scripts about raising a son, and when he sort of gave me a little bit of feedback that actually made a lot of sense, I listened to him. I
Mhm,
realized there's nothing more important than relationships with my son, and that being distracted in that relationship for this one period of time, that actually I needed to take advantage of that. And then, of course, this other influence of being a custody expert, and everybody's saying, "I want more time." These, especially fathers, "I want 50%. I have a right to have 50 of time." And me thinking, you're not even using the time, you know? So it all came together in that moment to think, I'm going to use the time that I have with my child. I'm going to be fully conscious of every step I take. And when I made that switch based on those 2 influences, my son sort of saying, right, "Why are you angry at me? We're already late. Like,
mhm,
you're distracted and you're lecturing, and I'm not, you know." And in fact, that just did the exact opposite that I wanted him to do, which he would just like take longer. He'd lag behind me and I would be frustrated and I'd be pulling my hair out. But truthfully, once I just let go of it all and accepted and stopped worrying that I had to teach him this thing, I became
mhm,
fully present in every step I took, and I became the father I wanted to be, which is fully accepting the moment that I had with this kid. It made all the difference in the world. And now this boy who's 22 years old, he gets to work on time. I
yeah,
didn't have to teach him that.
mhm,
My lectures didn't do shit. But I tell you what did, my 15 minutes of custody when I accepted that moment, those
mhm,
moments, it changed our relationship fully. From that
yeah,
moment on, I used that as a model for my relationship with him anytime it got
mhm,
hard. I'm not saying I didn't make any more mistakes. There were many
yep,
times when I tried to
right,
lecture him and be the parent that knew it all and hand
mhm,
down the things that were going to make him a man. But what I really started to realize is that boy is going to figure it out for himself. My job is to be a a relate to create a positive relationship with him so that he can come to me and be vulnerable, and in his most vulnerable time I can be there for him, but also he can be there for me because now we have an adult
mhm.
relationship. He was a early producer on my podcast, and he gave me some of the best advice I've ever gotten on my podcast, many
There you
times,
go.
more than so many times. I give my son Ellery, shout out to Ellery. He sat on that couch with me and said, "You should do this, or this is, you're just," anyhow, he just gave me great advice. So being able to take advice from our children and know that you can actually depend on other people too, to your point, right? To ask for help. You give them an opportunity. By the way, that's
Mm,
what it does. It gives people an opportunity to help you.
feedback, yeah. I loved how his vulnerability allowed for you to make the changes, and so there's this piece where, yes, it's welcome, we need it, and to close it off closes us off to so many changes, so many opportunities to grow. it takes some removing defensiveness. We got to be able to receive input and impressions. We only grow from more vulnerability, even the vulnerability of others. And so just being able to be confident in holding space that you are enough and it's okay and people will accept you. And it's,
So
yeah,
hard to
and it's tough
accept
to kind
that,
of get there.
this idea that we are enough. I've been really working on being my own best friend. Of course, because I have this podcast about friendships, I do sort of look outside of all these people that have been my friends, and then yet ultimately being one's own best friend is really where it starts, right? If you can be your own best
Yeah,
friend and support yourself in this sort of dichotomous way, observing what comes up for yourself and actually knowing yourself really well, you can be good with who you are and accept yourself for who you are without judgment. That's shit is really hard though.
it is. So I've been well immersed in Eckhart Tolle for this year, Power of Now, New World, talking about enlightenment and things being, in a sense, just a natural flow. And everything that's in life is what would be in a good life. In a good life, you're going to have good days and it's going to be amazing and it's going to feel easy and effortless. But a good life also has struggle and challenges and things like that. From that, I mean, great books, deep intellectuals or people who loved Kendrick's, Mr. Morale, the Big Steppers, definitely check those books out and just thinking about just the ego and your sense of self. And one of the concepts that came from those books was this idea of self-love and self-respect. Are you granting yourself that peace, that self-love based on what you do and what you do for others, or are you basing that off of just your essence? Are you loving people for what they provide you or genuinely just in their essence and in all perpetuity, all their whole existence of them being their good days and their bad days, or do you only like them for your good days? Just like applying that to yourself. If you know you have this thing, you're not chasing it. It doesn't lead you. You're not putting so much weight or putting it on a pedestal where it dictates whether you are happy or successful or good. And I think there are a lot of things that people chase in order to quantify that life is good or going well.
Yeah.
And it's this piece of right now with the masculinity worth value that we had talked about with this how the manosphere is kind of centering around men. You are only valuable, you are only worthy, you are only great if X, Y, and Z. If you have the money, if you have the girls, if you have when in actuality, you always have this thing. And so many people get caught in these traps of, well, I won't be happy until I have enough money. I won't be happy until I have plenty girls. I have a brothel of them. I won't be happy unless I get the highest paid job. I won't be happy because I won't be worthy. I won't be of value. I can't marry this person because I need to be this certain stat. You always have this thing. And until you realize this, it'll forever be out of reach. And so I played with it, I explored it, the only movie that I can really say, "Okay, yes, like, this is actually captures it," Wizard of Oz. All this throughout the whole movie,
It's a
they've
great
always
point.
had what
Yeah.
they needed.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
needed to go on embark on this
Right.
journey,
Right.
this odyssey. They've always had it, and if you
Mm.
live life with the idea that you always have this thing, you don't have to go out of your place. You don't have to be somebody else. You could just be yourself and be happy and have it. And so then if we work from a place of no matter what, you're always a man. You're a man if you love flowers. You're a man if you don't have a job. If you're still a man, no matter what. If you talked about your feelings, if you talk to other people about your wants and your insecurities and things that you wish were better, then how much could a man's wellness improve? How many suicides each year, each day that could we avoid if we knew that
Yeah.
piece?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think to your point, I had one of my friends who committed suicide early on, and we think he had a secret. This guy was on my lacrosse team. He was the best lacrosse player in the state of California, and he went off to UPenn and became an All-American in the East Coast. And he was the most incredible lacrosse player any of us had ever seen. And he came home after
Mhm.
college and he killed himself because we think he had a secret that he was not being vulnerable with other people about. Everyone from the outside thought this guy had everything going for him. 6'3", beautiful. All the girls loved him. He had everything on paper, but because something inside of him, he was not sharing with other people. So to your point, and we've talked about vulnerability many times on this conversation, and you've talked about suicide. And suicide is when we feel like we have no one who really understands us, and we don't truly accept ourselves for who we are at a core. And I think
That are
so many
yeah,
people are suffering from this sense of self that we're not enough. And to your point, we are enough.
and believing in that. And I think from working from that place, we are able to kind of let people in and how much men's lives could change if they could be vulnerable in that piece. If they could be vulnerable with others, maybe they would recognize that they don't feel emotionally safe around and they can find other people. Maybe they won't be in these destructive relationships. Maybe they will feel more fulfilled by life and happier. Maybe they will be more loving of themselves. And if they don't have to be so rigidly restrained to this piece of masculinity that only dictates that they can only have it if they play by the rules of everybody else.
They could be
And
less
maybe they
lonely and less isolated and in more relationship with more people that actually allow them to feel like they are known and seen and cared for.
yeah. Yeah. Or even to be able to take risks that are different or be able to talk to some people that can help them through these situations.
Yeah.
Maybe even come to therapy and
Yeah.
make that connection. Or maybe transcend the anxiety to be in places where they don't have control and they're okay with it.
Yeah.
To be in relationships and be open to feedback and changes and the wishes of others so that they can join in.
Yeah.
So
That's well-being, to have a sense of growth, right? A growth mindset, to be able to learn from these things. We have to figure it out as we go along. And to your point, it's never the destination. It's always the journey. It's always what we're learning on the path, right? So the Wizard of Oz is a great point. It's like, or the Wiz, like you're learning on the path, right? It's never where you get to, right? The destination just gets keep putting out, and at some point we're all gonna die. So the goal is to learn something from everything. So some would even say there's no bad or good, right? It's just all learning.
yeah. So I hope that there's more men's groups out there. Groups are tough to kind of create and hold and be consistent with. I hope that people can confide in their friends and be able to do that. And I hope that everybody can find that connection in some way, form, or fashion, or even develop that relationship with their significant other. And so I want to close out with this quote. Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom, and maybe people have heard it and seen it on social media, but I mean, it is one of my mantras that I'm focusing on these past couple of months is I know you can be more, but you're enough already. And even if you just stay right where you are, I'll be right here next to you. You're going to be great, but you don't need to be great. And I'm with you no matter what. And at least then he starts that quote with, I wonder how many men have heard that.
Mm. Well, I really appreciate that, and I really hope. I guess when I was talking about my son, I really when I got the image of that being what I wanted him to know in that moment, that he was good enough, and that actually that our connection was good enough, and that I didn't need to have all these dumb expectations necessarily, and that covered up that he was enough. And when I accepted that, it gave him permission to grow, I think, and me to grow. So we grew together. Appreciate that.
Woo! Couple times. We got a little dusting here. I can't lie, Chandler. But otherwise, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Close this out before tears actually drop. This is Therapy House the Podcast. Thanks you guys for joining us. Thank you, Chandler, for joining me. And
Thank you,
again,
Jeremiah.
another step to our bromance
No doubt.
continues.
No doubt.
Got to have you again back on the podcast. Where can they find you? Where do they find you at?
I got a couple different links to the sphere, whatever it's called. I'm really excited about my Hometown Friends podcast. So hometownfriends.com, hometownfriendspod.com. You can catch me on Instagram, Hometown Friends Pod. And then my professional career is Amity Consulting. Amity means good relationships. And I try to encourage co-parents to have good relationships, peaceful relationships with each other. So my worlds are divorce and separation and child custody work in my private practice. And then my other passion is this Hometown Friends podcast. And then I lead Tribe One, which is a nonprofit to end loneliness and isolation with friendship and belonging initiatives. So that's kind of where I am. Tribe1.org, amityconsulting.com, and hometownfriendspod.com.
There you go. All right. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen. All right, guys. Peace.
Thanks, Jeremiah.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Therapy House, the podcast. Jeremiah Knight signing out. Be sure to like, comment, rate, and review the episode and follow us on Instagram. Therapy House Podcast. All one word, easy to remember, easy to find. But yeah, until then, peace out, guys. Say bye, Brody. Oh, okay. He wants to subscribe. Hey.